They tried to remove him. They tried to destabilize Burkina Faso. But instead of falling, Ibrahim Traore just received advanced Chinese military weapons, and that changes everything. This isn't just about a failed coup. It's about a major shift in power in the Sahel. China has long been one of Africa's biggest trading and investment partners. But today, Beijing is taking that relationship a step further, deep into the defense sector. Nowhere is this shift more visible than in the Sahel, where Chinese-made weapons are rapidly changing the military balance on the ground. Burkina Faso has just received a major shipment of Chinese armored vehicles and heavy artillery, and the impact is already being felt. Advanced rocket launchers, armored fire support vehicles, and modern artillery systems have been delivered and deployed across the country. For a nation that once relied almost entirely on France and the United States, this pivot eastward could permanently reshape the battlefield. So why now? And what does this mean for Burkina Faso and for Africa's future? The quiet streets of Ouagadougou were interrupted by the roar of engines and the clatter of steel. Under tight security, columns of brand-new Chinese military hardware rolled into fortified bases. This wasn't rumor or propaganda. Verified footage showed endless rows of VN-22B fire support vehicles, PLL-05 self-propelled gun mortars, and SR-5 multiple rocket launch systems, all painted in desert camouflage. Engineers prepared the machines as soldiers stood by, visibly aware that something historic was unfolding. This delivery was more than just equipment. It was a statement. At the center of the shipment was the VN-22B, a six-wheeled armored platform capable of withstanding armor-piercing fire while engaging fast-moving targets with its stabilized 30mm autocannon. Its advanced fire control system allows accurate targeting even while on the move, dramatically improving Burkina Faso's ability to respond to ambushes in harsh terrain. For troops once forced to fight from exposed pickup trucks, seeing these machines in operation marked a dramatic shift in capability. But the armored vehicles were only part of the story. The PLL-05 120mm gun mortar systems introduced an entirely new level of flexibility. Mounted on armored chassis, these hybrid weapons can strike insurgent positions from long range and instantly transition to direct fire if militants close in. For soldiers previously limited to outdated mortars or vulnerable artillery setups, this represented a revolution in battlefield control. Then came the most intimidating addition of all, the SR-5 multiple rocket launch systems. With modular launch pods capable of firing both guided and unguided rockets up to 70 kilometers, Burkina Faso now possesses genuine long-range strike power. Militant groups that once felt safe in remote strongholds must now face a new reality. No sanctuary is truly out of reach. The psychological shock alone could alter the dynamics of the conflict. This shipment did not appear overnight. Over the past year, Burkina Faso has quietly built the logistics backbone for modern warfare, receiving mine-resistant, ambush-protected vehicles, armored personnel carriers, and heavy logistics trucks. But the August 2025 delivery stood apart, larger, more sophisticated, and deliberately public. Unlike earlier transfers that arrived quietly, this one was unmistakably visible. The message was clear. Burkina Faso is no longer scraping by. It is rearming, modernizing, and preparing for a new phase of war. The timing could not be more revealing. As Western military support steadily declined, France withdrawing, the United States scaling back, and promised aid failing to materialize, Ouagadougou found itself increasingly isolated. Into that vacuum stepped China, not with speeches or conditions, but with convoys of steel. Where the West hesitated, Beijing advanced. And in the Sahel, that move may change everything. Still, it would be reckless to ignore the risks. Advanced weapons only matter if the soldiers using them are fully trained. Integrating autocannons, hybrid mortars, and modular rocket systems requires new battlefield doctrines, rigorous training, and strict logistical discipline. Without that foundation, even the most sophisticated systems risk becoming nothing more than expensive symbols rather than real game changers. But the sheer speed and scale of China's deliveries suggests that Beijing is thinking beyond hardware alone. Training, technical support, and operational guidance appear to be part of the package, signaling a clear intent to ensure these weapons are not left gathering dust. This shipment marks a defining moment for Burkina Faso's military. Once written off as overstretched and under-equipped, the army now possesses capabilities equal to, if not exceeding, those of many neighboring states. Armored columns backed by long-range rockets and rapid-fire autocannons could soon face insurgents who have grown accustomed to overwhelming lightly protected convoys. Yet one critical question remains. Is firepower alone enough to change the course of the war? To understand why this shift was necessary, we have to look at the brutal reality Burkina Faso has endured for nearly a decade. Since 2015, insurgent violence has turned vast regions of the country into active war zones. Entire villages in the north and east were burned to the ground. Government outposts were overrun. Families fled in terror, abandoning everything they owned. By 2024, nearly 2 million people had been displaced, placing Burkina Faso at the center of one of Africa's worst humanitarian crises. The army, stretched thin and poorly equipped, often arrived too late or not at all. Militants, moving swiftly on motorbikes and pickup trucks, struck villages and convoys before vanishing into forests and remote terrain. Soldiers armed with aging rifles, a handful of worn-out armored carriers, and limited artillery were locked in a constant cycle of reaction. Every time territory was reclaimed, insurgents adapted, reshaping the battlefield once again. This is why the weapons delivery was seen not as a luxury, but as a lifeline. Each system directly addresses a weakness that has haunted Burkina Faso's forces for years. The VN-22B fire support vehicles finally give soldiers the ability to respond to ambushes in real time. Unlike exposed convoys that are easy targets on open roads, these armored platforms allow troops to advance under protection while delivering precise, high-speed autocannon fire against moving threats. In a conflict where most attacks occur during transit, this combination of mobility and survivability can mean the difference between disaster and dominance. The PLL-05 gun mortars solve another long-standing problem: flexibility. Insurgents often hide in dense forests or reinforced mud structures, positions that small arms struggle to neutralize. Traditional mortars could target these areas, but crews were vulnerable and slow to adapt when militants closed in. The PLL-05 changes that equation. Commanders can strike enemy hideouts from a distance and immediately transition to direct fire without switching platforms, allowing Burkina Faso's forces to control the tempo of battle for the first time. And then there are the SR-5 rocket systems, perhaps the most transformative addition of all. For years, insurgents relied on Burkina Faso's vast rural landscape as a shield, retreating deep into areas beyond the army's reach. That advantage is rapidly disappearing. With rockets capable of striking targets up to 70 kilometers away, known camps, training grounds, and supply depots are no longer safe, even in remote regions. With guided munitions, these strikes can be precise, minimizing waste while maximizing impact. But the effect goes beyond firepower. It fundamentally alters the psychology of the conflict. Insurgent groups can no longer assume they are untouchable simply because they operate far from patrol routes. For the first time in years, the balance of fear may be shifting. Morale was another silent battlefield Burkina Faso had been losing for years. Soldiers were sent into combat knowing they were outgunned, under-equipped, and facing enemies with superior mobility. That sense of fighting a losing war slowly eroded unity, discipline, and belief within the ranks. Modern weapons don't just change the balance of firepower, they restore confidence. They send a powerful message to the frontline soldier. Your government values your life, your mission, and your chances of victory. In conflicts like this, where insurgents rely heavily on fear and psychological collapse, that renewed confidence can be just as decisive as bullets and rockets. But while these weapons address immediate tactical weaknesses, they also raise a deeper question. Why did China step in when Burkina Faso's traditional Western partners did not? For decades, the United States poured billions into counterterrorism across Africa, and France positioned itself as the guardian of Sahelian security. So how did Ouagadougou end up looking east for survival? For generations, Paris dictated Burkina Faso's security playbook. Once considered a reliable pillar of French military influence in the Sahel, the country depended on French troops, training, and air power to confront rebel threats. But that partnership came at a cost. French support was never unconditional. Military assistance was tied to political loyalty, economic concessions, and acceptance of France's dominant role in regional affairs. As insurgencies spread and French operations failed to deliver lasting security, frustration boiled over. By 2022, the streets of Ouagadougou were filled with protesters demanding an end to French presence. When French troops eventually withdrew, they took with them the security guarantees that had anchored Burkina Faso's defense for decades. Many expected the United States to fill the vacuum. Instead, Washington hesitated. Its involvement remained limited, focused on intelligence sharing and selective assistance, guided more by counterterrorism doctrine than by the survival realities facing Sahelian states. Burkinabe leaders grew increasingly frustrated with Western conditions. Governance benchmarks, oversight mechanisms, usage restrictions, and endless procedural delays. For a government under constant insurgent pressure, those constraints felt disconnected from reality. Burkina Faso didn't need lectures, it needed weapons. And that's when China entered the picture. Unlike Western powers, Beijing doesn't attach political strings to arms deals. There are no demands for electoral reforms, no governance preconditions, no ideological tests. China offers speed, scale, and financial flexibility, and delivers first, asks questions later. That approach aligned perfectly with Captain Ibrahim Traore's vision of sovereignty and independence. While Western capitals debated accountability and democracy, Chinese convoys rolled in with steel and firepower. But this shift wasn't just about convenience, it was deeply symbolic. By turning to Beijing, Ouagadougou made a clear statement. Burkina Faso would no longer exist as a Western client state. Partnerships would be based on mutual interests, not colonial history. And the visibility of the Chinese weapons reinforced that message. Unlike Western arms deliveries, often quiet, limited, and discreet, the shipment was public, filmed, and widely shared. It wasn't just a military transfer. It was a geopolitical declaration planted firmly in the shifting sands of the Sahel. This move also reflects a wider regional realignment. Mali and Niger have both distanced themselves from France. Mali has openly embraced Russian military support, while Niger explores Turkish and Chinese alternatives. Together, these nations are forming a bloc that is increasingly post-Western in orientation. By supplying Burkina Faso with modern weapon systems, China places itself at the heart of this transformation. But the implications go far beyond one country. Arms sales open the door to training programs, maintenance contracts, and long-term military partnerships. Over time, they bind armies to Chinese supply chains, shifting dependence away from Paris and Washington toward Beijing. Every armored vehicle and rocket launcher delivered doesn't just alter battlefield dynamics. It quietly reshapes the balance of global power in Africa. Burkina Faso's decision goes far beyond battlefield survival. At its core, this move is about sovereignty, about choosing partners who respect national decisions instead of dictating them. It's about reclaiming control in a world where power is often imposed, not negotiated. But this raises a crucial question. How does a country with one of the lowest GDPs per capita on the planet afford such advanced military systems? The answer isn't ideology, it's strategy. And it lies in the unconventional financial and political arrangements behind these deals. Arrangements that reveal just how far both sides are willing to go to protect their interests. If you believe in the total liberation of Africa, drop your thoughts in the comments below. Like the video, subscribe for more deep, informative content, and let's continue. Burkina Faso's economy is fragile. High unemployment, mass displacement from years of violence, and extreme poverty define daily life for millions. So when convoys of newly acquired Chinese armored vehicles roll into military bases, the obvious question follows: how is this even possible? The answer lies in how China structures its defense agreements. Unlike Western suppliers, who typically demand large upfront payments and enforce rigid repayment schedules, Beijing has perfected flexible defense financing. These deals often combine concessional loans, delayed repayments, and sometimes barter-style arrangements tied to future resource production. In simple terms, Burkina Faso gets the weapons now and pays later. Gold is likely at the heart of this equation. Burkina Faso is one of Africa's top gold producers, and gold remains its most reliable source of foreign revenue. Analysts believe Ouagadougou may have pledged a portion of future gold exports as collateral for the arms deals. By linking repayment to natural resources instead of draining immediate cash reserves, the government secures critical firepower without bankrupting itself. This isn't a new playbook. China has used similar resource-backed arrangements in countries like Angola and the Democratic Republic of Congo, where oil and minerals financed infrastructure and military projects. Another likely mechanism is concessional weapons lending, low-interest loans with minimal penalties and repayment timelines stretching decades into the future. This isn't charity, it's calculated. By easing short-term pressure, China locks in a long-term partner. Once an army adopts Chinese systems, it becomes dependent on Chinese maintenance, training, ammunition, and spare parts. Switching suppliers becomes costly and impractical. Influence follows logistics. But Burkina Faso isn't putting all its eggs in one basket. Traore's government has also engaged Egypt for armored vehicles, Turkey for drones, and invested in local production of light armored equipment. This diversification is deliberate. It reduces dependency and strengthens bargaining power. By showing it has options, Ouagadougou can negotiate better terms with every partner. The China deal, then, isn't an isolated move, it's part of a broader strategy that pits suppliers against each other in Burkina Faso's favor. Critics warn that such agreements risk mortgaging the country's future, trapping it in long-term repayment schemes that could undermine sovereignty down the line. Supporters counter with a harsher reality. When towns are burning, soldiers are dying, and borders are collapsing, survival today outweighs theoretical risks tomorrow. The cost of doing nothing is far greater than deferred debt. For Burkina Faso's leadership, the choice isn't complicated. It's existential. Arm now, or risk the collapse of the state. That is the stark reality facing Burkina Faso. But beyond security, there's a powerful domestic political calculation at play. By securing advanced weapons through flexible financing, Traore's government reinforces its legitimacy at home. The message is unmistakable. The leadership can survive Western abandonment. Soldiers are no longer being sent to the front lines empty-handed, and citizens can see the state rearming in real time. This deal is not just about guns, it's about perception, confidence, and authority. Chinese financing ensures that Burkina Faso does not appear weak, either to its own people or to the world. Yet this financial maneuvering reveals something even bigger. Burkina Faso isn't simply buying weapons. By accepting Chinese arms delivered rapidly, financed creatively, and backed by natural resources, the country is stepping into an entirely new model of international relations, one where Beijing, not Paris or Washington, sets the terms. That leads to the defining question of this moment. Does this shift bring lasting stability to the Sahel, or does it simply replace one form of dependence with another? That debate will shape the next chapter of this story. The arrival of Chinese weaponry in Burkina Faso doesn't just change one army, it reshapes the entire Sahel. For years, the region was dominated by Western military operations like France's Operation Barkhane and a broader Western-led security framework. That architecture is now collapsing, replaced by something far more unpredictable and unmistakably multipolar. Burkina Faso's deal with China is the clearest signal, yet that the Sahel no longer accepts being treated as a Western sphere of influence. Mali has already turned to Russian military contractors. Niger, following its political upheaval, is exploring Turkish drones and Chinese partnerships. Now, with Chinese armored vehicles and rocket systems openly deployed, a new bloc is taking shape. Together, these Sahelian states are experimenting with sovereignty, testing whether African nations can secure themselves without Western oversight. For Western capitals, this raises uncomfortable questions. France, once the region's dominant security guarantor, has seen its credibility collapse. The United States, though still present through intelligence and drone operations, is increasingly viewed as cautious and reactive rather than committed. China's intervention exposes a vacuum the West failed to fill. Where others hesitated, Beijing delivered, rolling in convoys of modern military hardware within months and altering the battlefield almost overnight. That speed alone carries enormous symbolic weight. Insurgent groups are watching closely too. For years, they thrived on the belief that state forces were slow, poorly equipped, and ineffective. Mobility, surprise, and rural sanctuaries were their greatest advantages. That advantage is now under threat. Stabilized autocannons, hybrid mortars, and long-range rockets mean that hideouts once considered safe may no longer be beyond reach. Militants will adapt, as they always do, perhaps dispersing into smaller units or hiding among civilians. But psychologically, the balance of fear may begin shifting back toward the state, and the consequences stretch far beyond the battlefield. Burkina Faso's pivot toward China reflects a broader awakening of African agency. For decades, African states were told that Western approval was essential for their security. Ouagadougou is now demonstrating that alternatives exist, and the rest of the continent is watching. If Chinese support helps Burkina Faso reclaim even part of its territory, the model could spread. Arms deals may evolve into deeper partnerships spanning infrastructure, technology, and governance, cementing China's influence across Africa. But this path is not without danger. Dependency on a new patron, especially one as pragmatic as Beijing, risks reproducing the very vulnerabilities these nations are trying to escape. If repayments are tied to gold exports, future economic shocks could give China leverage over national policy. Critics also warn that an emphasis on heavy weaponry alone may overlook the deeper roots of the crisis: poverty, marginalization, weak governance, and unresolved political grievances. Without addressing those foundations, even the most advanced weapons may offer only temporary relief. The question now is not whether Africa is changing, but who will shape that change, and at what cost. Advanced missiles can wipe out militant positions, but they can't rebuild trust between a government and its people. Burkina Faso's leadership understands this reality. Still, their calculation is brutally clear. Survival today matters more than hypothetical risks tomorrow. For them, partnering with China isn't about swapping one master for another. It's about refusing to remain vulnerable while waiting for Western capitals to make up their minds. This is not submission, it's a statement. A declaration that African sovereignty will no longer be delayed, outsourced, or negotiated on foreign timelines. In the eyes of Ouagadougou, The Chinese alliance represents something deeper. The chance to redefine sovereignty on African terms, diversify power relationships, and challenge long-standing global hierarchies that have kept the continent dependent for decades. And this story isn't just about Burkina Faso. It's about a region standing at historic crossroads. If Chinese weapons help Burkina Faso reclaim territory and restore confidence, Beijing could rapidly emerge as a central force in African security, triggering a wave of similar alliances across the Sahel. But if this strategy fails, it may reinforce a painful truth: that no external power, Western or Eastern, can fix the region's crisis from the outside. One thing, however, is already undeniable. The Sahel is no longer a testing ground for Western experiments. By openly embracing Beijing's military support, Burkina Faso has sent a powerful message to the world. Africa is choosing its own path, even if it unsettles global powers. Those Chinese convoys rolling into Burkina Faso weren't just delivering weapons. They were delivering a message. A signal that the rules are changing, and that the future of Africa will no longer be written in Paris or Washington. So here's the question. Has Burkina Faso triggered the biggest power shift the Sahel has seen in decades? Will Chinese weapons succeed where others failed? Or is this simply the beginning of a new dependency under a different flag? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this analysis insightful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more deep dives like this one.